Hello, and glad to see that you're back to learn more about the Robotic Enterprise Framework. In the previous series of videos, we've explored the main features of the template by breaking down a pre-built project. Now that we've covered the basics, let's focus on building a project based on the REFramework with Orchestrator queues. In the following video series, we'll start from an empty project based on the template and go through the REFramework with Queue-Items-Checklist to create the UI demo consumer, the process that you've already seen completed. We encourage you to download the starting materials provided in this lesson and to build along with the videos. Also, it could be helpful to keep the REF with Queue-Items-Checklist open and to verify the steps shown in the video against the ones in the checklist. In this video, we'll learn how to fill in the settings, constants, and assets sheets of the config file according to the process requirements. This will cover the configuration in UiPath Studio section of the checklist. Ready? Great! Let's start by creating a new project in Studio using the REFramework template. As a best practice, the name should have the department name, the name of the template in use, and the name of our process. We'll select the location, provide a proper description, and click Create. For the purpose of focusing solely on the REFramework in this video series, we've already developed 4 simple workflows to use in our project: Add Transaction, Close, Force Close, and Open. All of them focus on interacting with the UI demo application. If you're building along, note that we provided the workflow files for download. In this step, we want to copy the files to our project folder. Let's create a new subfolder, name it UI Demo, and paste the workflows in it. If we refresh the project folder, we can see that the workflows are now available inside the UI Demo folder. Great! Let's continue by editing the configuration file found inside the project's data folder. Since we're aiming to build a consumer process that uses a queue as a data source, the first thing that we need to add here is the queue name to the settings sheet. Of course, before we can do that, we need to create the queue. So let's go to Orchestrator, and before we create a new queue, let's add a new folder. For this, we click Tenant, then Folders. We now click New Folder. Here, we type in REF UI Demo as the name, provide a description. Select the Tenant Package Feed option and click Create. Now we can hover over the REF UI Demo folder, click the More Actions menu, then click Add and select Queue. We'll name it UI Demo and add a description for it. We don't need to use unique reference for this process. We do want to use the built-in auto-retry mechanism for queues, so we'll leave this option selected. Let's go with a max number of retries of 1 and click Add to finish. Now, after the queue is created, we can upload our test data so that we can later test the automation. By using the Upload Items functionality, we can add queue items directly from a CSV file. Let's choose Upload Items and select the CSV file containing the test data. If you haven't done so already, make sure to download the CSV file containing the test data provided in this lesson. Okay, now that we've created the queue, let's copy its name and go back to the config file. We'll paste the value in the Orchestrator queue name field. As for the business process name, to keep things simple and clear, we'll use the name of our project. This information will be added in different logs so that it can later be used for reporting purposes. The settings sheet is where we add credential assets and any additional parameters. Thus, for an additional parameter, let's add the Orchestrator queue folder name. Now let's go back to Studio. The workflows that we've built for our automation do require additional input. Specifically, the workflow used to open applications holds 2 input arguments, the credential name and the UI demo app path. Values for both should be defined in the settings or assets sheets of the configuration file. Let's say that each of the machines that we plan to run the process on holds a different file path to the UI demo application. Here, we can define an asset for the application path if we want to overwrite this value for different robots. In the end, different robots can have different application paths configured in Assets in Orchestrator. Let's open Orchestrator and go to Assets. Here, we create a new asset named UiDemo Application Path. Set the type to text, provide a brief description, and specify the full path in the Asset Value field. Make sure that the UiDemo application is not in a read-only location and that the path is entered without any quotation marks. Perfect! Now, to use the newly created asset in our automation, we must add it in the Assets sheet within our configuration file. We'll name it UiDemo Application Path, as it'll take the application path from the asset with the same name in Orchestrator. We'll also add ref UiDemo in the Orchestrator asset folder and a description in the description field. And this was it for the Assets sheet. Now, for the UiDemo credential name, following best practices, we must define it as a credential asset type. Hence, we add a new asset of type credential and use admin and password as the values. Let's copy the name of the credential asset and paste it in the settings sheet of the configuration file under UiDemo credential name. Another setting which needs to be defined here is the manual transaction threshold. We'll set it to 10,000 as per our business process requirement. Transactions above this value will trigger business rule exceptions and will be saved for manual processing. Great, we're done with the settings sheet as well. Now let's check the constants. Since we want Orchestrator to handle retries, we must ensure that the max retry number here is set to 0. The max consecutive system exceptions constant allows us to set the maximum limit for consecutive system exceptions. How this works is that it keeps count of consecutive system exceptions. If we open the Set Transaction Status workflow and expand the system exception sequence, we can see the logged message that tells us the current value of the consecutive system exceptions. If we scroll down in the sequence, we can see that this value is incremented using an assign activity where the value is in-out consecutive system exceptions plus 1. This value is then verified within the initialization state. Let's set the value to 3, meaning that the process will allow a maximum of 3 consecutive system exceptions. If 3 consecutive system exceptions occur while processing the transaction, it stops the job. We also want the number of times the get transaction item and set transaction status activities are retried in case of an exception set to 2. Despite an exception occurring in the initialization state, a job still gets marked as successful. To mark a job as faulted when an error occurs in the initialization state, or when the max consecutive system exceptions parameter value exceeds a defined value, we must set the should mark job as faulted parameter value to true in the constants sheet. With this, we conclude the configuration step of building our automation project with REFramework and Orchestrator queues. If you haven't done so already, this is a good time to review the configuration in UiPath Studio section of the REFramework with Queue Items checklist. Have we missed anything? After having watched this video, could you say to what sheet of the configuration file we must add the queue name? Where should we add text asset names? Where should we add credential asset names? When do we set a max number of retries greater than 0? Where do we need to set the number of retries in the config file? In the next video, we'll focus on configuring all activities related to opening, closing, and killing the applications used in the process. Thank you for watching and happy automation!